Hello guys, hope you're all good. Been receiving a lot of requests from group members on how to go about washing your own engine. Trying to prepare something that might give you a better insight on how I go about it. So yeah, this is your typical R-18 engine from a Honda Stream. So I'm about to begin. Get your pads, get your pens, take the notes. Hello guys, before we begin, these are the products that I use, but keep in mind I'm not endorsing any particular product because there are a lot of products in the market that can do what these things are doing, and it boils down to your own personal preference. But there are basic things you should check, like this is a degreaser from Astonish Car Care. I got it from Naivas Supermarket. It goes for about 600 bob or thereabout, and does the job. I'll show you how. You have your toothbrush. This is particularly actually very important for reaching those hard, tight spaces. Don't worry, I'll never use this again. Your different brush sizes, obviously because of again reaching some certain places. You have your universal foam cleaner, your plastic restorer, and your faithful spray. You also need a blower. If you don't have a blower, you can use something like a vacuum cleaner. And if it's a vacuum cleaner, preferably there's that one that actually has both options of sucking and blowing. It's also important to have your tools ready. I'll show you why. And your bucket of water, some piece of cloth. Okay guys, we're about to begin. First step is safety first. Safety first. Safety begins with you. So if you have any bracelets, things like rings, ornaments, watches and all that, it's a good idea to remove them because they might get stuck in those small spaces, or you could actually even end up missing something. So make sure you remove all these bracelets and these bling things and all that, so that you can actually get the job done much easier. We are a little bit privileged here because this is not a very tight packed engine bay. You can see there, I can see my drive shaft over there and all that. There are those engines that are a little bit smaller, like the Fitgang L series. The engines are a little bit tight packed, but you try and make do with what you have. Like I said, safety first. So first order of business is, it's a good idea if you have gloves. These gloves are about 400 shillings, or they're about, again, think about them in Carrefour or Naivas somewhere. And these ones I particularly like because they have this on the palm side. It has a thick rubber padding, but this other side it's threaded, so they're actually quite comfortable and quite hardy. So when you're putting your hands inside the engine bay and all that, you don't want pieces of metal and other things scratching you. You may get infected. You can only imagine the kind of dirt that is in this thing. They trod over sewages and other unimaginable things. So like I said, safety first. Still on the subject of safety, first step, you have to disconnect your battery for obvious reasons. You're going to be using a little bit of water, not so much water, but a little bit of water and electricity. You know, it's a very good mix. So just to be safe, you're going to disconnect our battery. And how you go about it is you have to get your number 10. Just as a side note, this number 10 spanner comes in handy. I don't think it's something that anybody who has a car should not be having in their vehicle, because I found out number 10 actually opens a lot of stuff. You can see it opens the battery terminals, it can open your lot of things including the ignition coils and so on and so forth. So when it comes to disconnecting the battery, there's a process, or rather a protocol on how to go about it. First of all, you disconnect your negative. This is your negative, the one in the red is the positive. This is the real deal. So you first disconnect your negative and then disconnect your positive. And keep in mind, when you disconnect the batteries, things like alarms and every other electrical components in the car are not going to be working. So If there's something you need to get out of your car before you disconnect the battery, do it now to avoid a lot of inconveniences. Alright, disconnect your negative first. But actually, before you do that, these are the battery holders. I think it's first, you know what, I don't know its exact name. I know what it does. So you disconnect that first. Then you disconnect the positive. Please note the positive is disconnected after the negative. That is the protocol. Yeah, it's a tough gig. It's a very tough gig. Nobody said it's easy. Right, now that we have that out of the way, make sure when you're disconnecting your negative terminal, just have to give it a little yank. Make sure this doesn't touch anything on the body, or you might end up messing up your electrical systems. And most importantly, make sure these two terminals don't touch. So you have to just kind of place them someplace where they never meet. Now we are ready to disconnect our battery. And just as a side note, I've heard of ways you should be storing your battery when it's not in your vehicle. I understand it's not supposed to be on the ground, maybe for reasons of static electricity or whatever. So I've chosen to place it on some insulation, a tank. So we're good. At this stage is where you use your blower or your vacuum cleaner. I personally prefer the vacuum because it's a little bit more powerful. Now we've gotten rid of the loose dirt, so whatever hasn't come off now will come off later using water. Now at this stage, this is where we use the degreaser. What I like to do, like you can see on this R-18 engine, there are places that are prone to getting oil and they're quite difficult to reach, like just behind the ignition coils over there, on the air intake system, and some other places here and there. So at this stage, this is where I use the degreaser. This particular one does the job. So you spray a little bit. We can begin with there, the oil cap, just a little bit. Make sure it doesn't get to these terminals. This is what we are avoiding here, like a bad disease. So just be gentle with what you're doing. Okay, I've been keeping this engine quite clean for a while. I don't see a lot of spots where looks like there's oil, so it's not bad. You can actually go to the extreme and you can disconnect these ignition coils if you know how to do it. If you don't, I advise don't do it. But I disconnect them and plug the terminals so that I can better reach those spaces. Again, if you do not know how to do it, please don't try that at home. Just yank it, give it a gentle yank. And pops out the beads. As a bonus to myself, I'm in the habit of checking the condition of my spark plugs. I have a spark plug spanner. It's a hard one. So far so good. These are iridium plugs. These things never disappoint. Now all my ignition coils are out. You can see now I have better reach those places, but while you do this, make sure not to get any grit, grime, dust or soil into the spark plug spaces, because that might be a problem. If not now, maybe later, but it will definitely be a problem. So now using a brush I can reach these tough areas. It's been about 10 minutes since I applied the degreaser, so by now it should have eaten, for lack of a better word, any grease or grime that might be there. Alright, at this point I have to take back the ignition coils because I don't want water getting into the spark plugs for obvious reasons. So here we go. Just pop them in. The reason why I've done this is I wanted to reach these hard places, but if your engine doesn't require you to do all that, it's actually advantageous not to do it. So before I start spraying water, I need to get these things back. At this stage you can take advantage of the disconnected terminals and use your brush, toothbrush, to clean such areas. You need to be subtle with the whole process. Don't use force. These machines, engines in particular, can be a little bit sensitive at times. So yeah, I've cleaned the pots. Can put back my reconnectors. Should be going all the way. Make sure everything is nice and tight. This is the point where now the spray comes in handy. Right. You can actually see, because of the work the degreaser had done, it's now easy to wash away oil. Again, being very careful not to get these terminals wet. That's it's a good advice. It's good advice to use this spray can. Yeah, now comes the easy part. Make sure the water is properly squeezed. fuse box. It's your ECU. Again, but the other side note, try and not get water onto this cat converter, because I noticed it rusts. I've seen some cat converter covers that rust, so it's a good idea not to get it wet. And if it's wet, you can try and switch on the engine so that it can run for a time. It heats quite fast, so it will get rid of the water, preventing rust. But it's always also a good idea to wash the engine when it's a little bit warm. It helps with drying the water faster, because at the same time, as much as you're using water, the water might do you damage when it gets to places where it can cause rust. That's the intake. That's your fuse box. That's your ECU. Again, gloves are important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be throwing my hands inside these components just like that. So clean each and every space you can reach. Make sure your kitambaa is not dripping, because if it were dripping and you put it on top of a terminal like this one, the water just might get to the connector inside. You clean where you can reach. If you can't reach somewhere, don't insist. You might damage something trying to get to something else. You've noticed I've not used any detergent. Not that I have anything against detergents, but I just prefer degreasers to detergents, because I believe in using something for what it was meant for. It was a vyombo kwa engine. It's not my thing, but you can use the detergent. I have nothing against that. So there's only so much a wet piece of cloth can do for you. That's where the brushes come in. This is quite a tedious process, by the way. It might even take a couple of hours. So patience is a virtue.
Stand back.
Look at that. Cleaned. Good as new. At this stage, because I've disconnected stuff, I like covering this part so that any air doesn't get, any dusty air, any dust doesn't get to the engine, because I've just removed the air filter. So I put a piece of wet cloth there and get on with my brushing. Unapiga kitu muswaki mzuri bana. This is the alternator. Make sure not to get any sort of water with a damp, or otherwise to this thing you're going to have a long day. Trying to do this with one hand. It's quite easy to put back. There you go. I use this particular plastic restorer, tire and bumper trim gel. It's water based. Make sure not to get something that is oil based. Don't use WD-40 or anything to give your engine a shiny look, because if something is oil based, it's just going to sit there and collect that. But with water based, it's going to evaporate over time, and it's going to leave your engine looking glossy and all that. So you apply a little bit there. Using a dry cloth, just rub it all over the place. So guys, you can use foam cleaner to clean this thing as well, but because of its amount of dirt that's on it, I prefer to use a vacuum cleaner. That's why I didn't use this one. I have returned my battery. Like I said, first took out the negative, then the positive, but when you're putting it back, you put in the positive first, then the negative last. Now to check whether everything is working. Kila kitu iko shwari. Nothing out of place that isn't supposed to be in place, and vice versa.